4:47 a.m., Atlanta, Georgia. The city is still dark. Federal agents move through the pre-dawn silence in coordinated columns. No sirens, no warning, just the low hum of tactical vehicles and the quiet shuffle of boots on pavement. This is not a drug house in a forgotten neighborhood. This is not a warehouse on the edge of town. This is a compound in Buckhead, one of the wealthiest districts in the American South, a place where diplomats live, where foreign officials work, where immunity is assumed. By 6:13 a.m., 167 individuals are in federal custody. The operation involved the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the U.S. Marshals Service, and elements of the Department of Defense. Over 400 personnel, 12 entry teams, air support, electronic surveillance units, evidence response coordinators. This was not a raid. This was a siege. And the target was not a cartel safe house. It was an embassy-affiliated residential and administrative compound that had been operating under the cover of diplomatic status for more than 6 years. The American public woke up that morning to headlines they did not understand. The words sounded impossible. Embassy, diplomatic immunity, federal arrest, drug trafficking, smuggling ring. But by the time the sun rose over Atlanta, the reality was undeniable. A foreign diplomatic network had been weaponized, not by a rogue agent, not by a corrupt individual, but by an organized, transnational criminal enterprise that had embedded itself inside the machinery of international law and had been smuggling narcotics, laundering money, and facilitating cartel operations on American soil under the protection of diplomatic credentials. This was not a typical raid. When federal agents breach a location, the public expects certain images. They expect dealers, gang members, street-level operators with guns and cash scattered across kitchen tables. This was not that. The individuals arrested were not wearing gang colors. They were wearing business attire, pressed shirts, ties, identification badges issued by foreign governments. Some carried briefcases. Others had been in the middle of preparing official documents when the doors came down. They were administrative staff, drivers, security personnel, consular assistants, cultural liaisons, translators, and in some cases individuals holding legitimate diplomatic rank. But beneath the paperwork, beneath the titles, beneath the veneer of international cooperation was something else entirely. A logistics network, a distribution system, a smuggling pipeline that moved cocaine, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and heroin across state lines using vehicles with diplomatic plates, shipments labeled as official correspondence, and personnel immune, by treaty, from routine law enforcement inspection. This was not a drug problem. This was a national security breach. The operation had been under federal surveillance for 19 months. Over 800 hours of intercepted communications, coordinated tracking across 6 states, financial analysis spanning 12 countries. The investigation began when a routine DEA interdiction in Laredo, Texas, flagged a shipment destined for Atlanta that had been routed through a diplomatic cargo channel. The shipment contained 42 kilograms of cocaine. It was marked as cultural materials. The trail did not lead to a cartel lieutenant in Sinaloa. It led to an address in Buckhead, to a building flying a foreign flag, to a compound protected by international law. And once investigators began pulling threads, the entire system unraveled. The invisible system. The genius of modern smuggling is not violence. It is not secrecy. It is legitimacy. The cartels have learned that the most effective way to move product is not to hide it, but to make it legal, to place it inside a framework so respected, so procedurally complex, that no one dares to question it. Diplomatic immunity exists for a reason. It protects foreign officials from harassment. It allows embassies to operate without interference. It ensures that international relations are not disrupted by local legal disputes, but it also creates a blind spot. Diplomatic vehicles are not subject to search. Diplomatic cargo is not inspected by customs. Diplomatic personnel cannot be detained without cause. And if cause is difficult to establish, if the paperwork is clean, if the credentials are valid, if the behavior is professional, then the system protects them. The Atlanta network understood this. They did not recruit criminals. They recruited employees, individuals with clean records, families, mortgages, and resumes. People who could pass background checks. People who looked exactly like what they were supposed to be. And once inside, they were trained, not in violence, in logistics, how to label packages, how to route shipments, how to use encrypted channels, how to coordinate timing with cartel contacts without ever saying the words, how to move weight across borders using the infrastructure of international diplomacy. The compound itself was not a fortress. It was an office park, conference rooms, filing cabinets, desks, computers, a cafeteria, a parking garage. Everything looked normal because it was normal, except for what was happening beneath the surface. Shipments arrived weekly. They came through air freight, through consular mail, through private courier services contracted by the embassy. The drugs were never stored long term. They were received, repackaged, and distributed within 72 hours. The network operated like a corporate supply chain: intake, quality control, distribution, payment processing. And because everything was routed through diplomatic channels, it was invisible. Federal investigators only caught the scent because of a single mistake. A driver, employed by the compound, was involved in a traffic accident in South Carolina. His vehicle was transporting 12 kilograms of fentanyl. He attempted to use diplomatic immunity to avoid the stop. The responding officer noted the claim but did not immediately release him. A supervisor escalated. A federal liaison was contacted, and within 48 hours, the DEA had opened a case file. What they found was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern. Over the following year, agents identified 63 separate smuggling events connected to the compound. They tracked financial flows to cartel-controlled accounts in Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. They documented meetings between compound personnel and known traffickers in Houston, Miami, and Los Angeles. They watched as the network expanded. By the time the raid was authorized, the operation was moving an estimated 200 kilograms of narcotics per month. That is 440 pounds. That is enough fentanyl to kill millions, enough cocaine to flood a region, enough methamphetamine to destabilize entire communities. And it was all moving under a flag. Scale and consequences. Numbers are not abstract. Every kilogram of fentanyl represents approximately 500,000 lethal doses. The Atlanta network, in a single year, facilitated the movement of over 2,000 kilograms of narcotics into the United States. Do the math. That is enough poison to kill the population of a major American city multiple times over. In 2023, over 112,000 Americans died from drug overdoses. Fentanyl was involved in more than 70% of those deaths. The crisis is not distant. It is not theoretical. It is happening in suburbs, in small towns, in schools, in hospital parking lots. And behind many of those deaths is a supply chain, a logistics network, a system designed to move product from production to consumption with ruthless efficiency. The Atlanta compound was one node in that system, but it was not alone. Federal investigators have identified similar operations in Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, and Houston. Each one operates slightly differently. Some use consular mail, others use contract employees. Some exploit trade agreements, others manipulate visa programs. But the principle is the same. Use legitimacy as cover. Use institutions as shields. Use the law as a weapon. The damage extends beyond overdose deaths. Communities lose trust. Parents fear their children. Schools implement lockdowns. Emergency rooms overflow. Addiction treatment centers cannot meet demand. Law enforcement agencies are forced to divert resources. Courts are backlogged. Prisons are overcrowded. The social fabric frays, and the cartels profit. Conservative estimates place the annual revenue of Mexican cartels at over $30 billion. Much of that money comes from the American drug market. It funds violence in Central America. It corrupts police forces. It destabilizes governments. It finances terrorism. The Atlanta operation alone is believed to have generated over $80 million in revenue during its operational lifespan. That money did not stay in Atlanta. It moved. It was laundered through shell companies, through casinos, through real estate transactions, through cryptocurrency exchanges. It was transferred across borders using wire services, trade-based schemes, and bulk cash smuggling. And it funded more operations, more networks, more death, war-level federal response. When the federal government decides to act, it does not do so lightly. The authorization for the Atlanta raid came from the highest levels: the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, the National Security Council. This was not a local law enforcement matter. This was a coordinated strike against a threat that had national implications. Planning took months. Surveillance teams monitored the compound 24 hours a day. Undercover agents infiltrated support networks. Financial analysts traced money flows. Communication specialists intercepted encrypted traffic. Linguists translated conversations in multiple languages. The operational blueprint involved 12 simultaneous entry points. 4 tactical teams breached the main administrative building. 3 teams secured residential units. 2 teams controlled vehicle access. 1 team isolated communications infrastructure. 2 teams provided perimeter security. Air support included drones with thermal imaging and a helicopter-based command unit. Electronic warfare specialists jammed cell signals and internet access within a 2-block radius to prevent warning messages from being transmitted. The entire operation was timed to the second. Doors were breached within a 7-second window. Entry teams moved with surgical precision. Individuals were separated, identified, and secured before they could destroy evidence or coordinate resistance. No shots were fired. By 6:13 a.m., the compound was under federal control. Evidence recovery began immediately. Agents seized over 400 electronic devices, 32 filing cabinets, 14 vehicles, 7 safes, financial records spanning 6 years, correspondence with foreign government officials, shipping manifests, personnel files, surveillance footage, and narcotics. 17 kilograms of cocaine, 4 kilograms of fentanyl, 9 kilograms of methamphetamine, packaging materials, scales, chemical testing kits. The scale of the bust was unprecedented, not because of the drugs, though the quantity was significant, but because of what it represented: a breach of international norms, a weaponization of diplomatic systems, a betrayal of the treaties that govern how nations interact. The State Department immediately notified the foreign government involved. Diplomatic channels were activated. High-level conversations took place. Some officials expressed shock. Others demanded proof. A few attempted to invoke immunity protections, but the evidence was undeniable, and the United States government made clear that diplomatic status would not shield criminal conduct of this magnitude. Within 72 hours, the foreign government issued a statement. It expressed regret. It promised cooperation. It announced internal investigations. But the damage was done. The aftermath: when trust breaks, it does not break loudly. It breaks quietly, in small ways. In the questions people begin to ask. After the Atlanta raid, those questions spread. If a diplomatic compound can be used to smuggle drugs, what else is being hidden? If embassy personnel can be compromised, who else might be? If federal agencies missed this for 6 years, what else are they missing? The raid did not create fear. It revealed it. Parents in suburban neighborhoods started asking questions about who lived in the diplomatic residences near their schools. Local police departments began reviewing protocols for interacting with diplomatic vehicles. Businesses that had contracts with embassy-affiliated organizations faced scrutiny. The compound itself was shut down. The foreign government relocated operations. Personnel were recalled. Some faced charges in their home country, others disappeared. But the network did not die. It adapted. Federal investigators believe that elements of the operation have reconstituted in other cities. New contacts, new routes, new cover stories. Because the fundamental advantage remains. Diplomatic systems are still complex, immunity protections are still respected, and the volume of international traffic is too large to inspect comprehensively. The cartels know this, and they are patient. For the 167 individuals arrested, the legal process began. Some cooperated. Some remained silent. A few attempted to claim they were unaware of the operation's true nature. Federal prosecutors were not sympathetic. The evidence was overwhelming. The charges included conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, racketeering, and violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Sentences ranged from 8 years to life in federal prison. But even as justice moved forward, the broader implications remained unresolved. How many other networks exist? How many other systems have been compromised? How many other institutions are being used as cover? The answers are not comforting. Intelligence assessments suggest that transnational criminal organizations have been systematically studying and exploiting the gaps in international law for decades. They have recruited individuals with access to diplomatic channels, trade systems, financial institutions, and immigration services. They have turned the machinery of globalization into a weapon, and they are winning. Not through violence, not through terror, but through invisibility, through patience, through the exploitation of trust, the warning. There is a reason this story matters. It is not because it is shocking. It is because it is ordinary. The people arrested were not monsters. They were employees. They had families. They paid taxes. They attended community events. They looked exactly like everyone else. And that is the point. Modern danger does not announce itself. It does not wear a uniform. It does not carry a weapon. It operates inside the systems we trust. It hides behind the institutions we respect. It moves through the channels we assume are secure. The cartels have learned that the best way to evade law enforcement is not to fight it, but to become part of it, to infiltrate the structures that are designed to stop them, to use legitimacy as camouflage. This is not a failure of law enforcement. Federal agents did their job. They identified the threat. They built the case. They executed the operation. But the system itself is vulnerable, and the adversaries are sophisticated. They study international law. They hire experts. They exploit bureaucratic delays. They understand that the more complex a system becomes, the easier it is to hide inside it. And they are not going away. The Atlanta raid was a victory, but it was one victory in a war that has been ongoing for decades. A war that is fought not on battlefields, but in conference rooms, in shipping manifests, in financial ledgers, in encrypted messages. A war that most people do not even know is happening. So what is the defense? Awareness, not paranoia. Not suspicion of every neighbor or every institution, but a recognition that the threat exists, that it is real, that it is here. Communities must be vigilant. Law enforcement must be supported. Reporting mechanisms must be trusted. And the public must understand that the cartels do not operate like they did 30 years ago. They are not street gangs. They are corporations. They have HR departments. They have logistics teams. They have legal advisors. And they are embedded in the fabric of modern life. The 167 arrests in Atlanta represent thousands of lives that will not be destroyed by overdose, families that will not be shattered, communities that will not be poisoned. But the network was just one operation, in one city. On one day, the broader fight continues, and it requires more than federal agents. It requires a society that refuses to be complacent, that refuses to assume safety, that refuses to trust appearances, because the cartels are counting on complacency. They are counting on the assumption that embassies are safe, that diplomats are trustworthy, that the systems are secure. They are counting on us to look the other way. The raid in Atlanta proved that assumption wrong, but the question remains, how many more operations are still hidden? How many more networks are still functioning? How many more threats are still invisible? The answers will not come easily, but they will come. Because federal investigators are not stopping. Because the agencies are coordinating. Because the resources are being allocated. And because the American people are starting to understand that the war on drugs is no longer fought in the mountains of Colombia or the deserts of Mexico. It is fought here, in our cities, in our neighborhoods, in the buildings we pass every day without a second thought. The Atlanta raid was not the end. It was a warning, a reminder that danger no longer looks dangerous, that criminals no longer look like criminals, that the most effective threats are the ones we never see coming, until it is too late. Final reflection, figure 47 a.m., Atlanta, Georgia. 167 arrests, 6 years of operation, millions of dollars in narcotics, thousands of lives at risk, and one undeniable truth: the systems we trust can be turned against us, but so can our awareness. If you found this investigation valuable, share it, discuss it, reflect on it. Because the fight against these networks does not begin with federal agents. It begins with a public that refuses to be blind. Stay informed, stay vigilant, stay aware. The next raid may be in your city, the next network may be in your neighborhood, and the next warning may come too late, unless we start paying attention now.